And thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I'm very happy to see that we are all in. We apologize for holding you for 5 minutes. But I want to say that you are all welcome to today's soil advocacy session. We are delighted to have you join us again today. It is always a pleasure and it's very exciting when we all come together as soil advocates to learn, to grow, and also to deepen our understanding of a health soil. I know every session brings us a new a knowledge or an insight. I am always happy at the end of the session from your comments. And today's session promises to be also one of those insightful lessons. And I encourage everyone to participate actively. We have incredible guest speakers today lined up for us, and so we'll introduce them shortly. But first, I would like to invite all of you, whether you are attending on Zoom or you are following us over YouTube live stream, feel appreciated. We are always dedicated to bring you this important session. Feel free to ask questions in the chat area. And if also you are given an opportunity to speak on Zoom, please turn on your camera, or otherwise you'll not be able to participate. You are supposed to put on your camera. Throughout this session, you'll remain muted until you're also only given a chance to put on your camera. Now, let us invite Sue to take us through the next phase. Let us put our hands together. Let us give Sue a round of applause as she comes in. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you. Thank you so much, James. And thank you, all of you who are in the audience. Great that you're all here. Lovely to see you. We're going to have to turn all of your cameras off and all of your microphones off. So sorry for that. However, we will, when we come to question and answer time, we're going to be able to put your cameras back on. I can see that some of your cameras are actually on. I do ask you, please, from a tech husband, maybe you'll do the necessary, just so that we can stay focused on our wonderful guest speakers today. Okay, so the way we're going to work today is a little bit like yesterday. Our guest speakers are going to come on and they're going to do their presentations. We've got fantastic topics. And if any of you, when we come to the end of some of the presentations, we will have a time where you can do ask and interact with the guest speakers. So we'll have question and answers. When that happens, please do raise your hand. If you have any questions, put them in the chat box, and we'll come around, hopefully get around to as many as we can. And if you see that you've been asked to unmute yourself, please do it as quickly as possible. We can't unmute you. You'll have to unmute yourself. And if you take your time, you'll miss out. You snooze, you lose in this game. So on we go. So yesterday we had a brilliant session on minerals where we learned that sea salt and rock dust are the most cost-effective and natural way to remineralize our weathered soils. It's a big secret out there that nobody really knows about, and we do now today. And it gives us a lot of tips in the way we can produce more economically and safer. We're also reminded of 5 key ingredients we need for healthy nutrient cycling soils: minerals, microbes, and mulch, the 3 M's, water, living roots, be they cover crops or cash crops. And we also learned that polycropping is the best way to maximize the benefits from the soil sociobiome, and that diversity drives the systems below and above the ground. Today, we're going to join the dots from soils to us, where the topic now turns to nutrient density. What does it mean? We'll start the session with a presentation by newly ordained Regen Elder, although he's not that old, Dan Kittredge. For those who've just joined us today, welcome. Dan is a regenerative farmer with over 30 years experience in the field. He's also the founder and executive director of the Bionutrient Food Association, BFA. Known as one of the leading proponents of nutrient density, Dan works to demonstrate the connection between soil health, plant health, and human health. So let's all give a big emoji welcome to Dan again. And Dan, the floor is all yours.
All right. Well, it's wonderful to be back again. Looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for inviting me. I'm calling in from a different country in Europe tonight. I'm in Sweden today.
Before Dan is like a pollinator. He's just all over the place, pollinating the world with all of his knowledge. So yesterday he was in France, today he's in Sweden. Who knows where he'll be tomorrow? Sorry, Dan, do continue.
It's 5 countries in 5 days this week. Yeah, I started in Italy on Monday, and then it's Netherlands tomorrow and Ireland by Friday. So it's quite a quite a busy week. And I'm really excited. I've had a wonderful time last night with you all. I really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully today can be something close to that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing the time with Delia. So I'm gonna just jump into the presentation and hopefully take no more than half an hour to cover my slides, and look forward to the Q&A. Certainly, some questions when I'm done, but maybe we can save a few and have a more of a conversation once Delia is done as well. So my computer being as rudimentary as it is with my technological capacity, I've asked Sue to run the slides. So I'm ready to jump in, Sue, whenever you are with the first slide.
There we go.
Great. All right. Well, I think I might have mentioned it yesterday, but the organization that I'm the founder of is called the Bionutrient Food Association. Our website is bionutrient.org. This is the front page on our website, and this also is the farm that I grew up on. I grew up in Massachusetts in the northeast corner of the U.S. So you can get a bit of a vision of my childhood there and the lay of the land where I'm from. So nothing too much more to say there. Perhaps just that UMass, yeah, I'm a UMass grad too as well. Carmelo, that's my alma mater. UMass Amherst. This term nutrient density, I pretty much helped to create around 2008 or so. When I realized that there was this dramatic nutrient variation in food, and it seemed to connect to so many things, and there was no word for it. So I am probably probably the world's leading voice in it all, and I'm honored that it's turned into a word that people know now, more than 15 years after creating it. This presentation is going to be around that topic. What is it? And what have we learned, and where are we at in the process of defining it, and what are the opportunities going forward as far as being able to disrupt the dominant agricultural paradigm, hopefully to bring us back more towards those holistic, integrated dynamics we were discussing yesterday. So I think we can go to the next slide. So yeah, I'm the founder of the BFA. We're an educational nonprofit. We were founded in 2010, and our mission is to increase quality in the food supply. And by quality, we're talking about flavor and aroma and nutritional value. And we think that connects to soil health, ecosystem function, farm viability, human health, removing the need for chemicals and fertilizers, perhaps removing the need for pharmaceuticals, reversing chronic disease. So our thought is that the inherent quality of the food is a high ground around which a broad suite of allies and a social movement can come together as a thing to be focusing on. Not against. We're not against anything here. We're for food being more nutritious, and that's really sort of the mission and envision of our organization, that the ambient level of food for everyone on the planet next year is more nutritious than it is this year. And 2 years from now, it's more nutritious than it was, the previous year, so that we collectively, for everyone on the planet, are continuing to increase nutritional value in the food we have access to. And that the act of producing that will heal the environment, the act of consuming that will heal us ourselves. And as we are healed, our cultural impacts and our ways we engage with each other will become more harmonious. So as a solutions-oriented point of coming together. All right, next slide. Can we have the next? Yeah, okay, there we go. Brilliant. So yeah, we're founded in 2010. And the initial work of the organization, it was education, working with growers to understand how to work with nature, how nature evolved plants to grow. And you see here some headshots of some of the presenters we've had in our conference, the Soil and Nutrition Conference, which I'm guessing some of you were able to take part in this year. Really, really excited to have so many participants from Africa this year. It was made me so happy to have that connection. And as I think I said yesterday, all of the recordings from all the presentations from all of the years of the conference are on our YouTube page, freely available for everyone on the planet. And that's something that's really important to us. But yeah, foundationally, as we were teaching these courses and presentations and conferences, the word was spreading. Participants and farmers were experimenting, getting better results, telling their friends. The courses would spread from here to there to there, and it sure looked like this process of working well with nature was improving soil health, was improving ecosystem function, was improving farm viability, was improving pest and disease resistance, was improving flavor and aroma and shelf life. And we thought, you know what, if seems like it doesn't matter where in the world you're doing it, doesn't matter what crops you're working with, doesn't matter, what scale you're operating at, doesn't matter, what environmental conditions, what climate, this process of working with nature does seem to have all these benefits. Is there some way we can bring it to scale beyond the sort of going from here to here to here, but sort of bring it, more broadly forward? And this is where the strategy around the research and the meter came up. I think we can go to the next slide, Sue. So yeah, the vision was, that money seems to have a very powerful impact in human decision making. People do things because of money, and so if we could figure out some way to make it economically advantageous for people to produce higher quality food, then that would be a way to get it to happen more broadly. Is there some way we could align economic self-interest with these other dynamics? So we had a hypothesis, which was that if people could go to their point of purchase, whether it's a local market or a supermarket or wherever they're buying their food, and if they have a choice, if you've got 3 different carrots you can choose from, or 3 different potatoes or milk, if you've got some choice in what you can be getting for your family, and you would know that the carrots from this company or this farmer are 80 out of 100 from a nutritional standpoint, and the ones over here are 40 out of 100, and the ones over here are 20 out of 100 as a scale, that maybe people would choose the 80s first and leave the 20s. And if that was the case, that people would choose the things that are more flavorful, more nutritious for themselves and their families, then that would incentivize the farmers to focus on nutrition as opposed to volume. Because right now, most of markets are focused on volume. They're not focused on nutrition. So that was the vision. If we could help people choose what's better for them, they would. And that would inspire a broader global shift. And the thought was that to do that would require 3 things being true for the strategy that we were developing. One, that there was that there is a dramatic nutrient variation in food, which was not clear when we started this. We thought it was true, but talking to scientists in 2015, 2016, they were skeptical. The second thing was we thought that not only was there nutrient variation, was it dramatic, but that also it connected to soil health. The scientists we were talking to said maybe there's some nutrient variation, 2% or 5%, but it probably connects to the variety of the plant or the soil type, maybe the fertility program, but soil health, not really. And the third question we had was, if there was nutrient variation, is it possible to build some kind of a meter that you could use to flash a light at those carrots to be able to test them in real time? So you don't have to listen to any certifications, any labels, any marketing claims. If there's some way that you could actually test directly. That was the sort of the vision, the questions that we thought needed to be answered for the vision to be plausible. And so we started in, maybe we can go to the next slide, Sue. We started in 2017 with, we built a meter. So we built our first little handheld meter that we thought this could be a plausible scenario. In 2018, we built our first lab in Michigan, and we had people send in carrots and spinach from around the US. From farmers markets, from farms, from grocery stores, from CSA bags, all kinds of them in their gardens. And we wanted to know what was the spectrum of variation of nutrients in these carrots. We didn't have enough money to test all the nutrients, but you can see on the bottom left of your screen, antioxidants, polyphenols, and all those minerals, magnesium, sulfur, potassium, calcium, etc., and bricks. This is what we looked at in the crops that year in 2018. In 2019, we set up our second lab in California at Chico State University, and we got up to 6 crops that year. So we added grapes and tomatoes and lettuce and kale to our carrots and spinach. And we had farmers, when they were sending in samples from their farms, they would take 3 carrots or 3, spinaches or whatever it was. Because to be scientific, you have to do replications. You don't want to just do one because it could be an outlier. So you take 3 samples to see if they all look similar. And we asked the farmers to take the soil from underneath each of those carrots or spinach plants at 2 depths. And you can see the things we looked at in the soil there in that middle section, soil 0 to 4 and 4 to 8 inches. As well, we asked the farmers a bunch of questions about that crop, like what was the variety? Where did you source it? When did you plant it? How did you prepare the soil? Did you apply cover crops? How did you kill the cover crops? What was your fertility program? Did you irrigate? How often? With what kind of water? Did you do any side dressing or foliar sprays? We asked a whole bunch of management questions. And then in 2020, we set up our third lab in Europe and France. And you can see there on the right-hand side, all the number of samples of individual crops we collected that one year. The total over all the years was about 10,000 samples of crop and about 8,000 samples of soil. You can see with the green dots, each one of those was a farm. So each one of those across Europe there and North America, those are people sending in the crops and the soil and answering the management questions. And the orange dots are the people who were, we call them citizen scientists. They were going to the grocery stores and the farmers markets and purchasing things off the shelf and sending them in. So this was the basic research we did to answer our 3 basic questions. How dramatic is nutrient variation? What's causing whatever variation we find? And then is it possible to build a handheld tool to test it in a non-invasive way? Next slide. So these next couple slides I'm going to show you here are some of the variations we found. What I'm showing you here is graphs from carrots, and understand that everything I tell you here about these carrots, and I explain what these graphs mean, we have graphs like this from 20 other crops. So wheat and oats and potatoes and beets and blueberries and apples and lettuce and kale and leeks and Swiss chard and zucchini, 20 other crops as well. So everything we looked at looked similar to this. So not everybody has a mind that works, that can read scientific graphs like this. It's not a natural thing to do. So I'm going to spend a minute to explain here what these graphs mean. So the one on the left, it says sulfur in carrot on top there. And on the bottom, it says 8.41 in the left corner and then it says 33.19 in the right corner of that with the left-hand graph. And then right at the bottom, in the middle of it, it says sulfur mg per 100 g fresh weight. So what this is talking about is the amount of sulfur that was found in the carrots we tested. And milligrams per 100 grams of fresh weight is what that means, mg per 100 g. So on the left, you say 8.41. So that means that the carrot with the lowest level of sulfur we found had 8.41 milligrams per 100 grams of fresh weight. And the one on the right, this is 33.19, had 33.19 milligrams per 100 grams of fresh weight. So if you divide 33.19 by 8.41, you come up with about 4, which means that the carrot on the right had 4 times as much sulfur as the one left. That's a 4x variation is one way of saying it, 4 times, 400%. That's not 4% or 40%, that's 400%. So you'd need to eat 4 of the carrots on the left to get as much sulfur as if you got 1 of the carrots on the right. And then you see the graph, it goes up and down, and it's got different colors. So right at the bottom, it says fifths of the range. So if you can think of like the 8.41 is 0 out of 100, and the 33.9 is 100. The red section is 0 to 20. The orange is 20 to 40. The yellow is 40 to 60. The light green is 60 to 80, and the dark green is 80 to 100. So, yeah, you can see that the peak of the curve is in about the 20th to 25th percentile. What that means is the vast majority of the samples of carrots we found had about 25% of what they could have in them. So relatively low levels of nutrients of this sulfur was what we found in the carrots in relation to what was possible. If you look over on the right in phosphorus in carrots, it goes from 11.7 to 93.69. If you divide 93.69 by 11.7, you get a little bit more than 8, almost 8.5. That means the carrot on the left, you'd have to eat 8.5 of those to get as much phosphorus as if you ate 1 of the carrots on the right. So that's an 8.5x variation. That's a big difference. You have to eat 8 of these to get as much as if that mineral as if you ate 1 of those. That's not a small amount of difference. Again, the peak of that graph is in about the 30th percentile. So the vast majority of the samples are quite low. The level of phosphorus in them is quite low in relationship to what's possible. This is a pattern we find across the board here. I like to use the example of grades in school. I'm not sure how it works everywhere in the world, but when I went to college and even in high school, if you got anything from a 90 or above, 90 out of 100 or above, that was an A minus, an A, and A plus. That was the A range. If you got from an 80 to an 89 as your final grade, that was in the B, from a B minus to a B plus range. 70 to 79 was C, 60 to 69 was D, and anything below 60 was an F. That was a failure. If your final exam grade, your final grade was 59 or lower, you failed that class. And if this is the range, we can see that all the reds and the oranges and yellows are below 60. So if we think of that metaphor, what we can see is the vast majority of the carrots that we found had less than 60% of what's possible for phosphorus, similar for sulfur. What that means is most of what's out there for us to eat has much lower levels of nutrients in it than it could have. We can go to the next slide, Sue. All right, now we have here 2 compounds, antioxidants and polyphenols. These are sort of things that are understood to be, correlating with flavor and aroma, that are understood to be, very powerful in health-giving effects, and reversing cancer and diabetes and osteoporosis and sort of those chronic diseases. So antioxidants there on the left goes from 4.92 to 195. That's a 40x variation. That means you'd have to eat 40 of the carrots on the left to get as many antioxidants as if you ate one of the carrots on the right. 40. That's a big number. And the peak of the graph there is in the 15th percentile. Again, the vast majority of the crops we found had quite low levels of these really important health-giving nutrients in them. And this is just carrots, but I've got hundreds of graphs like this for 20 other crops, and they all look the same. This is the nature of the supply chain. We looked in North America and Europe. We didn't look in Africa. We didn't look in Australia. We didn't look in South America, but I'm guessing this is probably similar around the world. Again, we just looked in North America and Europe, but it seemed pretty categorical. On the right, we've got polyphenols. Again, those are the compounds that correlate with flavor and reversing disease, reversing chronic disease. 2.34 to 49.75. That's a more than 20x variation. Like 20, you have to eat 20 of those on the left, you get as much as one of those on the right. That's not small, 20. And the peak of the graph is in the 10th percentile. Most students didn't even get a 40 out of 100. So yeah, I like to think of it one way one way to say is that there's lots of opportunity for improvement. When you get down to it, we talk about the ways you can test the food you're producing and things, and sometimes farmers get a little bit self-conscious or feel bad about themselves. You know what? You're in good company. Most of us are not doing anywhere near as good a job as we could. And as we begin to work with nature, it's actually, you might not get up to 100 right away, but if you go from 30 to 50, all of a sudden you're better than almost anybody out there. So it's really, really exciting. But the sad part is that we understand the data is really quite categorical, that nutritional deficiencies correlate directly with disease. If we think about all the disease that we humans have, it's so nicely connects with the struggles that we're having physiologically, psychologically, emotionally, all those biochemical dynamics, our hormones, our emotional states, our gut flora, it's, the basic nutrition in our food, it seems, is relatively quite low. And that has a lot to do with why we are beginning to fall apart more and more, why we're getting these epidemic levels of disease that are showing up in the human population. And yeah, again, this connects directly with flavor, with aroma, etc. So next slide, Sue. So some people had questions, as we talked about before, about those were a couple slides talking about the range of variation of nutrient levels. These next couple slides are going to talk about what caused that variation. So on the left here, we have by variety, and this is BQI score. So this term nutrient density that we developed to talk about the range of nutrient levels in food is a concept, but it's not something we have defined yet. We don't actually have a definition of this is 50 out of 100, this is 25 out of 100, this is 80 out of 100 for any crop, for cucumbers or tomatoes or beef or rice. It's a concept and we're working to define it. And so this BQI score, this is the sort of right on top there, it says BQI score in carrot. That's an average of 6 elements and 2 compounds. So calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, sulfur, potassium, polyphenols, antioxidants. It's an average of those things. It's not a complete definition of nutrient density, but it's the best we could put forward right now based on the data we had collected. So there on the left, you see Napoli and Bolero and Nantes and Mokum and Romance. Those are different varieties of carrot. And you can see with a Napoli that there are some people in the red zone, the 20 and below, and a bunch in the orange zone, 20 to 40, and some in the yellow zone, 40 to 60, and a couple in the light green zone, the 60 to 80. And the Bolero got some reds, some orange, some yellows. The Nantes, reds, orange, yellows, light greens. Mokum, reds, orange, yellows, light greens, dark greens. Romance, reds, orange, yellows, light greens. So we're not seeing that by any variety, it looks like there's, this variety has high levels of nutrients or that variety has low levels of nutrients. What we're seeing is you can take any variety of seed and you can do a good job with it or a bad job with it. But variety does not seem to connect with nutrient levels. On the right-hand side, that says by climate region, and these are USDA, United States Department of Agriculture climate regions. So the Northeast is one region, the East, North, Central is another region, the Southeast is a different region, Central, Northwest, West, Southwest. So the US is a pretty big country. We got a lot of different climates, hot and dry and cold and wet and cold and dry and hot and wet and different soil types, some sandy, some clay, some mountains. Right. What we see here is you can do a bad job in any area and you can do a good job in any area. It doesn't really seem to connect that this part of the country or this soil type or this climate dynamic correlates with increased or decreased nutrient levels. Pretty much what we see is in any part of the country, in any soil type or any climate zone, you can do a good job or you can do a bad job. Okay, next slide. Okay, so on the left, by sample source, some people say, go to your local farm or go to the farmer's market and you'll get better quality. So what we have on top there is farm. The next one is store. The next one is garden. And the bottom says farmer's market. Yeah, I mean, and the people that we had sent in the samples are people that thought they were doing a good job. These weren't people that were thought they were doing a bad job. These are people who wanted to be part of our project because they wanted to show what a good farmer they were. And we got a whole bunch more reds and oranges than we do greens on those farms that sent in samples. The store, the grocery store, it's got a bunch of reds, but it's actually the farthest over green. So we found actually the highest sample of overall quality and care we found in a store, not on a farm. Garden is the next one. That it's fatter over there right in the middle in the 40 to 50 range. But yeah, it doesn't look like people who are growing carrots in their garden are necessarily doing a great job. And at the bottom, it's farmer's market. People who think that if you go to the farmer's market, you're going to get a better quality. Sorry, just doesn't. What we find is that most farmers, gardeners, producers are not doing anywhere near as good a job as is possible. Like I think I might have said yesterday, humility is a really important piece of this process. Humility that, you may be a person who means well and wants to do good things, but just because you have a good intention does not mean you're actually succeeding in producing, superior quality food. Okay, on the right-hand side, it's by practice. And so right on top there, it says certified organic. And you can see there's a bunch of reds and a bunch of oranges and a good amount of yellows and not too many greens. People who use cover crops, looks a little bit better, more yellows, less reds. No-till is the next one. Okay, yeah, it's, averaging right there in the 40th percentile, 45th percentile. Tillage comes next. No-till and tillage. Like, I don't see a lot of difference there between tillage and no-till. Maybe it's a little bit, average is a little bit lower, but not dramatic. The one below that is organic, but not certified. Those are people who are following organic practices, but haven't gotten a formal organic certification. Again, there's a couple over in that dark green zone, but it's not like those people are doing a really good job nutritionally. The next two, reference and none, those are basically from the grocery store and not organic. And yeah, if you see where they're the fattest, they're over there, they're fatter in the yellow range, which is above the orange. So you could argue that, the average grocery store carrot is better than the average no-till or cover crop carrot or certified organic carrot. That's a very uncomfortable statement for a lot of people. Like I think I might have said yesterday, I grew up on an organic farm. My parents ran an organic farming organization. This is not the kind of information that I would want to be sharing, but the problem with science, if you're doing it honestly, is you just have to share the data. You can't say I don't believe in it, and so therefore I'm not going to share it. Regenerative is the next one, right there, down there, right below none, and reference, and that is definitely fatter on the lower side. That means the average of the samples we got from people who said regenerative was worse than the grocery store. The next one is biodynamic. That looks a little bit better, but again, not too impressive. Local, actually, local has this fattest spot a little farther over. So you could maybe, but again, not a lot of samples and plenty of low. So what we basically see here is that by any individual practice, cover crops, no-till, organic, regenerative, etc., we are not seeing it correlate with increased nutrient levels by any point of purchase, store, farm, grocery store, farmer's market, garden, sourcing, not connecting. Variety does not connect. Soil type does not connect. The only thing that we found that connected was level of life in the soil. It was the level of microbes that were present in the soil, as in the more microbes in the soil, the higher the nutrient levels. And take it for what it is. You can have high levels of nutrients in the soil and not be organic. You can have high levels of nutrients. You can have high levels of life in the soil and not be organic. You can have high levels of life in the soil and engage in tillage. So it's not any one practice. I think it's really exciting is, it sort of goes to verify this thing that we understand, which is that it's the microbes that evolve the plants. And it's really only when the microbes are functioning well that the plants are functioning well. So, yeah, for me, that's actually not surprising. And it's really exciting that the data is verifying it. So yeah, I'll move on from this now because I'm using up more time than I wanted to, but I really wanted to elaborate on this point. So in 2021, after we had finished all this data collection and we had identified the nutrient variations and we had the scale and we had shown that it really did seem to correlate with soil life, not anything else. We also were able to build this handheld meter. I've got one right here, this spectrometer. It's it's very, very simple, but it works. And we were able to release calibrations for 10 crops. So it's not nutrient density. We're not telling you this is more nutrient dense or less nutrient dense. We're only testing for certain compounds, so antioxidants or polyphenols. So the question was, is it possible to build a handheld consumer priced meter that can be used to test nutrient levels in food with a flash of light? And we were able to say yes. For carrots, we built a calibration. You flash the light with this at a carrot and it'll give you a reading that is scientifically, valid. It can tell you the antioxidant level in this carrot is in the 80th percentile or the 40th percentile. And with zucchini, we only were able to do it with polyphenols. So with different crops, we had calibrations that were scientifically, statistically significant for different compounds, but we were able to prove that it is possible to build a meter that a consumer can hold and test a crop without squishing it with a flash of light, that nutrient variations are significant and they do connect to soil health. So that gives us the opportunity to talk about, a social movement that is based on supporting people to choose the food that's best for themselves and their families, and using that and the economic implications of that to incentivize farmers to focus on, building nutrition, which will heal the environment and heal humans. So let's just go. We got a couple more slides here. So after we'd verified that it was a possible scenario, we started on our defining of nutrient density process. We chose beef as the first food to start with, because there is more land in this planet used to produce beef than anything else. And if we're thinking about, using farming to help heal the environment, let's work on a food that actually has a major environmental impact. So our thesis was there was a direct connection between what the animals had to eat and the health of their meat. So we'll proceed forward to the next slide. And so we just basically engaged a much deeper level of scientific assessment in this process. We had people send in, I think we have samples from 4 continents in this project. When people sent in the steaks, we would look at hundreds of different nutrients in each steak. So elements and enzymes and vitamins and fatty acids and polyphenols, a whole suite of different nutrients. When they sent in the manure from the animals, we looked at hundreds of different species of microbes because we thought the microbiome was really important. Different kingdoms, archaea and bacteria, not just the presence of the species, but the sort of the quantity of that species. We had the farmers had to send in what the cows were eating, and then we would assess that for, the nutrients in it and the diversity of species. They sent in the soil that the food for the cows grew in, and we assessed that for a whole bunch of metrics. We actually fed some of the beef to humans, and we tested the humans for, nutrient health markers to see what happened to their inflammation markers, it's called, after they ate the beef. And we asked a whole bunch of questions about how those animals are raised. Okay, next slide. You can see here where we got the samples from. There's a couple more in Australia than that bullet point says, but primarily they're in North America because the logistics of shipping soil and forage and manure and meat across and around the world is actually really, really complicated. But we did get a really good diversity of different climate zones, soil types, management practices, genetics, etc. Next slide. This is a project we're almost done with. We now have collected all the raw data, and we've built the really, really complex database that we can use to actually come to the conclusions, because it's one thing to collect the data, which is enough of a pain in the butt, but then to actually put it into a database where you can actually look back and forth for the patterns is actually a really complicated project. But so we don't actually have our final answer for what is nutrient density in beef. Hopefully that'll happen in the next few months. But if you use this one thing called omega-6 omega-3 ratio, which some people may be aware of, it's a really good stand-in. We think, interestingly, in the way this is showing on my screen, you can't see the dots in the red zone. There's a bunch of dots here in the red zone that aren't showing up, but effectively, what it looks like is based on this omega-6 omega-3 ratio, which is very well studied and understood to connect to chronic disease in humans. The cows that were finished on grass that didn't eat grain in the last 6 months of their lives had a much better ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. It was the average, if you look in the lower left corner, was 1.7 to 1. I think the American Heart Association says that anything more than 4 to 1 is bad for you. Anything less than 2.5 to 1 is generally considered to be good for you. If you look on the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the average for the grain finished animals was 7.8 to 1. So yeah, and on the sort of where it says truly grass-fed, you can see we circled those, and it's like, those don't look like they fit. And that's because we had a big company that sells, hundreds of millions of dollars a year in beef that was part of the project, and they were buying beef from a new company. This is during COVID when this happened. And there were the ships that were carrying their beef from Australia over to California to drop it off, were stuck in the ocean because there was too many ships coming over. And so they had to source their meat from somewhere else, from somewhere they didn't know. And they were suspicious about that source. And so they sent that into our lab to see. They said, our sourcing company says this is coming from grass-fed beef. Is it really? And yeah, it doesn't look like anything else. So just because somebody says, actually, technically, most cows eat grass at some point in their lives. So yeah, so you can, honestly say this beef is grass-fed. It just didn't eat any grass in the last 6 months. So anyway, the opportunity here with this science is to be able to check and see what's actually happening, what actually is in the food. So marketing and labeling and all kinds of things like that from companies that maybe don't have our best interests at heart. We can, with spectrometers, we can look through that and we can see actually what's in the food. That's really, I think it's very exciting. Okay, next slide. All right, so here's our last slide I've got. Yeah, it sure looks like if you're using that omega-6 omega-3 ratio as our stand-in for quality, which it definitely we know connects to human health, what we see is the greater the diversity of plants that that cow has to eat, the healthier the meat is that we get from it. It's really, really quite simple. What cows ate, have evolved to eat for millions of years, is what makes what we eat from them healthier. Cows did not evolve to eat corn. Cows that eat corn, you can get beef from them, but that beef is not as good for you as the beef from cows that ate what cows have evolved to eat. So I'll stop there. There's a whole much longer conversation to have about this. I just, wanted to take 30 or 40 minutes to sort of outline our work, and maybe I look forward to a couple questions now, and really hopefully to a much more active conversation once Delia's had her presentation.
Amazing, amazing, Dan. And thank you for sharing this with us. It just got me thinking about a couple of things. Where we've put together a little bricks monitor to try and monitor and see what's happening with produce just using bricks labels, we found that indigenous crops that were not affected by pests and diseases actually had higher bricks. So higher or better nutrient cycling and better plant health. But we also found something that I saw in your data there, because you said that sometimes the stores had healthier produce, yet the farms, the stuff that was coming from the farms didn't. And one thinks then, but wasn't the stuff coming from the farms ending up in the stores? But I guess there's that entire secondary and other market, the processing market, the the industrial market, etc., where some of those products end up. Now, when we found that produce coming into particular stores in Thika, the mama mboga, the woman, the lady in the market who was selling produce, seemed to have really good high brick stuff. But I guess her customers liked her stuff and kept coming back to her, and they were influencing her, making sure that her suppliers were also bringing her good quality stuff. Do you think that that was the same thing, and one of the same reasons you might have been seeing better quality in some of the stores?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is there are some farms that are really big that are really good farmers. You don't have to be, a small farmer to be a good farmer. These principles of biological systems that I started learning almost 20 years ago, were taught by consultants who their business was working with big farms to help them do better. And I mean, I know of, farmers in Zambia and South Africa for sure who are operating on large scale and are doing a good job. So they are selling into the wholesale markets, whether it's for export to Europe or it's to other parts of Africa. I think the point is that the supply chain, which involves some big farms, doesn't only involve bad quality. And there's no necessary connection between scale and quality. Some store owners really do prioritize quality, and whether they use their flavor, or they can see, or they can feel, or whatever their ways of testing. If they go to the big market to buy for their store, they have choice, and some of them will choose better quality over lower price.
We did some testing also of things from an organic farmer's market, and we found that they actually had really low levels. And the reality comes back to the point of, just because it's got a label doesn't mean the farmer's doing a good job. So I like that. We can do a good job, we can do a bad job. If we don't know anything about the soil microbiome and how it contributes towards that, we're always going to be doing a bad job most of the time.
That's the real thing, is it's the soil life, it's the microbiome that correlates with quality. And, for all the soil food web stuff you've been talking about, however you get it, it's the conclusion to take home is, the more healthy the soil life is, the healthier your plants are and the more nutritious your plants are. It's not just about the soil food web, it's actually about your tongue and your children's health. I think that's hopefully is a powerful, thing to corollary to make it more relevant and more important and impactful for people. Because the
Yeah.
soil food web can be a little bit, like 2 steps removed, but nutrition for you and your family, I think that's kind of important.
Yeah. So we're going to wait in here for one more minute to see if anybody puts their hand up, if anybody has a question for Dan. And I'm just going to see if there's any question that's coming through on YouTube. Guys, we haven't forgotten you there. We can see you. I think everybody is flabbergasted with this information. They're like, what?
Sorry.
So Carmelo has put his hand up. Carmelo, can you keep your question really short to the point? Off you go. And then Rob, we'll do Carmelo and Rob, and then we're going to move straight on to the next speaker. Go ahead, Carmelo. You'll be asked to unmute yourself. Please go ahead.
So real quick. Hey, Dan.
Hey.
The technology that you were talking about in regards to consumer-based sensing of nutrient density, does that have anything to do with the sensor technology that John was talking about in the conference that we just had?
What he is doing with his meter is focusing on plant sap analysis. Basically, there's hundreds and hundreds of different meters out there. So it's not really about the meter because, there's just hundreds of them. It's about what is quality. Only when you've done the science to figure out what quality is, can you calibrate it to a meter. So could we use what John's working on to calibrate to nutrient density? Probably. We haven't looked into it because we don't know what nutrient density is. I was just in France a couple of days ago, and the guy I know for a couple of years gave me one of these things, which is it says magic pencil. You can't quite see it, maybe, but this thing's made in China, and it's way more sophisticated than the thing that we built, and it costs less. And yeah, and he spent a few $1,000s this year to calibrate this for plant sap analysis, which is what John's trying to do with his meter. So the idea is that this technology is coming. It's like, there's Samsung and there's Google's and there's iPhones and there's all kinds of smartphones out there. It's not like there's only one kind of smartphone that can work. There's all kinds of smartphones out there. It's not like there's only one kind of sensor that can work. There's all kinds of sensors out there. The thing is, can they be calibrated to nutrient density? And they can, but we have to figure out what that is first. So that's where we're stuck in the process, is defining it.
Perfect. So let's move on quickly to Rob, and then I'll bring you to a question that Margaret has in the chat. Rob, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Dan. I was wondering about the seed crop. Did one of your control groups test for the various different seed sources for the food crops that you were testing?
We didn't control anything. This was an epidemiological style of analysis, which basically means any sample we asked about 85 questions. Did we find any patterns based on seed source? I can't tell you that we looked. I know that the data is there about what the seed source was, but I'm not sure if we actually looked to see if that connected. I think our statistician looked at every data point for patterns and didn't find them, but I can't promise 100% that's true.
That'd be amazing. If you
I will say,
if you had biological seed were behaving differently than the
reason
yeah.
The reason I'm curious is because there was a point that was raised. I think it was a previous speaker. Was it David White? Who spoke about
James White?
James White, yes. Spoke about the appropriate microbiology being packed into the seed, like the seed is a vessel for appropriate microbiology for the plant's future life process.
The core microbiome, right? So there's billions of microbes inside the seed that will come out as the seed germinates. So that certainly has an effect, But if your soil that seed germinates in doesn't have enough moisture, then the microbes can't flourish, and then you aren't able to get the nutrients into the plant. Or if that soil doesn't have enough cobalt, or it doesn't have enough air. So the fact is, there's all these different dynamics that go into what causes the level of vitality of the soil life. And there's 100 different factors that are causal, but what we found was it's the end result of the level of soil life that connects. And you have to have all these pieces functioning well to get that high level. And almost nobody does have all these pieces functioning well.
So
We're all falling down in one or more ways.
Yeah, what I'm getting at is you couldn't seed crop by selecting the high nutrient dense food crop and then selecting that for seed to begin the next generation. You would require the infrastructure, as it were, of the available housing for the microbes.
I think it would be much better to have a healthy mother plant be where your seed comes from than an unhealthy mother plant. But if you take that seed from a healthy mother plant and you put it into a poorly functioning soil, you're not going to get anywhere near what's possible. Yeah. It's a multi-factor system, and we have to think of it as it's a living system. And the more we can treat it like it's a living system and care for it, the more well things are going to work. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Rob. Now, last question, Dan, before we move on to the next speaker. Could you explain a bit about how the soil biology showed to be such a big factor?
So the test we did was pretty simple. It's called respiration. And, we just collected all kinds of different kinds of data, like the organic matter, the pH, various mineral levels, what tillage practices were, what fertility practices were. We collected all this kind of information. And the way we tested the soil life was called respiration, where basically you take the soil and you dry it down to a certain percent of moisture, and then you measure out a certain quantity, you put it in a container, and then you add a certain amount of sort of deionized water, water with nothing in it. And then you put a lid on that container, and you come back in 12 hours and you measure the amount of carbon dioxide inside that container. And the more carbon dioxide there is, basically, the more microbes there were breathing in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide. So it's a very simple test. And that was the level of complexity we had to test it.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Dan, the point that you made around what happens to the food when we just spoke now about the different products getting into different systems, sales systems. You talked about the beef that was coming in. You talked about the integrity that was lost in that beef along the way, along the value chain. The buyer didn't know it, but you're able to actually see that in the data. It's a great segue into our next guest speaker. So we're going to talk to Delia Stirling. She has, for the last 13 years, been working in the food processing industry and is a commercial director at Brown's Food Company, a family-owned company that produces high-quality food products from local ingredients in Kenya. So Delia, welcome. Let's hear from you about that part of the journey from farm to plate, per se, beyond the plate.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here. I've actually been on the soil class the whole way along as a student, so it's great to be here and be here at the end. Yeah, I'm Delia, and I grew up on a smallholder farm in Limuru, and was lucky enough, it's about 8 acres, but my parents were always really self-sufficient, and so we grew up growing all our own food and making all our own food. So I grew up in that culture that if you want to eat something, then go ahead and make it. So that's actually how our business started by my parents. They wanted some cheese and grew up in Kenya. I'm fourth generation Kenyan. And my dad was craving some cheese and said to my mum, just make me some brie cheese. And my mum said, you can't just make cheese. And he said, yeah, we can. And they had a little bit of extra milk from their 2 cows, and that's how we started. And that was about 45 years ago. And we've always focused on that wholesomeness of food. My mum grew all our own vegetables because of all the chemicals that were in the vegetables being sold in Kenya. And it was all about, as Dan said, about her children's health. And that's sort of how we started. So now 45 years on, I'm the second generation. I've been running it for about 14 years. And it's really interesting. We've grown. I took over and it was about 3,000 litres of milk a day, and we're up to about 22,000 litres of milk a day on the dairy side. I'm working with thousands of smallhold farmers from Kenya, and it's still that same principle of working on quality and working on what the cows are eating and the conditions of those cows. And everybody always says to me, how do you manage that quality with that many smallhold farmers? And it's really interesting. Working with the smallhold farmers is much easier than actually some large farmers, because they're really interested in improving quality and in growing with us. So we test for aflatoxin. We have aflatoxin-free milk from thousands of smallhold farmers. And I think if you connect and work with the farmers, it's possible, whatever size you are. About 5 years ago, I started to work into other food systems because I was pretty frustrated. Talking to some of my farmers, they would take the payments that we gave them for their milk, and they said, we need those payments on time because we need to buy chemicals and fertilizers for our potatoes. And that really frustrated me. All of the work I was doing on improving livelihoods and improving farmers was going straight to chemical companies. So we started to diversify to say, could we apply the same principles of focusing on wholesomeness and nutrition across other foods? So we have a sourdough bakery now on our campus. We have salami and charcuterie, so preserving meats, fermenting meats here. We have alternate grain bakery, which works on biodiversity and encouraging millet and sorghums, and as many other alternative grains that we can. And so on this campus here, we call it the Living Food Campus. We really just focus on this wholesomeness and nutrition. And how do we keep the nutrition in the food when you pick that carrot from that farm? What happens to it along the way before it hits and ends up at the consumer? And there's so much that goes into food processing that I don't want to terrify you, but there's so many decisions all the time of shortcuts and ways to make food cheaper, and you're constantly under pressure to make this cheaper, make it faster, make it cheaper, and we want it now. And this pressure on processes is what we really stop and say we just won't compromise. And it's this challenge that we do to say, as we get larger and larger, and we're in all the main supermarkets here and supply all of the main hotels. So we're quite a large processor in Kenya. And can we stick to those values and say, are there ways we can do this using real food and continue to grow and be a larger processor? So those are the decisions we make. And I like to describe, we actually farm microbes on this campus. So just like the plants are farming their microbes to benefit each other, that's what humans do. And humans have done this for thousands of years. We've used microbes to preserve our food. We've used microbes for flavor. So before fridges and everything, our foods were preserved with microbes. And it also makes our food more digestible. And in modern food processing, these are things that we've forgotten. And just as Dan said yesterday on, learning and looking at nature, a lot of the processing techniques, if you just go back to things that make sense and using microbes to naturally ferment your foods, you actually get more digestible foods, you get better flavor, and you preserve the foods. So we use those techniques. We farm our microbes here to benefit us. We get better food, better flavor, delicious foods that are preserved in a natural way, and the microbes are happy. So just like the plants are using the microbes, humans have also used microbes in processing, and it's only very recently in the Industrial Revolution that we sort of lost track and lost touch of working with microbes to preserve our foods. So that's something that we do here on our Living Food campus. We do a lot of classes as well to educate consumers and try to get consumers to be touching and tasting and feeling the food again on how food's made. So you can come to a yogurt class because you need to understand, even if you don't make yogurt every day at home, you need to understand what goes into yogurt making. Work with warm milk, work with raw milk, understand what it feels like, and use your senses and be much more connected back to nature and how food is. This disconnect between our food and nature is where our health issues are coming from. We're just so disconnected. So another thing we work on is biodiversity score. So in a lot of our new products, we're looking at how do we actually increase the biodiversity in an ingredient. So like right now we have, I'll share my screen. We have a breakfast cereal that's coming out. Don't know if you can see my screen there. But part of that is this biodiversity index that we're putting on ingredients. So can we make a breakfast cereal that actually has lots of ingredients? So just like we've talked about the polyculture and farms that have biodiversity, they're a healthier environment for our microbes. They're sort of a self-sufficient world. Can we do that to our food so that the microbiome that we're feeding inside our gut is also getting that biodiversity? So remember, humans are mostly microbes. And without our microbes, we wouldn't last very long. And so how are you feeding those microbes to keep you healthy? So that's something we're working on. That's a little bit different there. So each one, we try to actually obtain a higher biodiversity score. So that's actually the genus, not just an ingredient count. That's actually a genus of plants that we're using to try to increase that there. So not only are you getting more macro and micronutrients, but you're also increasing that biodiversity of available nutrients for the microbes. I think that's about everything I had to talk about. But something a little interesting is I'm in a yoga class at the moment, and a lot of in yoga principles they talk about prana, and prana means vital energy or life force. And just as if you read up about prana, it says that it originates from the sun and connects the elements. So that's thousands of years old human knowledge that's talking about exactly what we've talked about in plants, capturing that energy from the sun, connecting it to the elements with the microbes and giving those plants prana or life force. And I think it's really interesting that we as humans then have prana or describe ourselves as having energy, and that comes directly from the food that we're eating and that life force that's in the foods, which is tied to what Dan's talking about on nutrient density. So I think that's really interesting, and I think all of us can taste and remember vegetables that just taste so much better than other vegetables. And I just back to children, my children grew up here on our farm and growing all our own vegetables, and they have grandparents in the US. And when my son was about 4, we were visiting, and his grandmother gave him some American broccoli, and he spat it out and said, "This is not broccoli." He said, "It doesn't taste like broccoli." And that's a 4-year-old, being connected there to tasting that nutrient density, and he wouldn't eat the broccoli in America, which was really interesting. So I think we need to try to be connected back to our instinct, because we can actually taste this nutrient density if we think about it. So that's a little bit about what we're doing. We do lots of classes and really encourage people to visit and sort of learn. And one of the things that we've started to do is we've started a movement called Beyond the Plate. And Sue came to the event about a month ago, our first event here. And I think it went really well. We had about 70 people, and the goal was trying to connect people all the way through the supply chain, from farmers, processors, distributors. We had the supermarkets here. We had scientists, we had NGOs who are working in food space, telling everybody how to grow, and our farm here in Kenya to feed everybody, the millions in Africa. And the goal was to sort of include everyone, even if they didn't think like us, because the goal was to try and share and connect and open people up to this idea of fixing our food system in a simple way, step by step, little by little. It's this being more aware of what's going on. So that event went really well. And so I think Sue will share the link. We have a form if you're interested in more events and being connected to this movement of everybody from supermarket to farmer. And actually on the day, we didn't allow anyone to know who anyone was. So we had farmers sitting next to CEOs of supermarket chains and large famous chefs sitting next to processors. So the goal was really trying to connect from a human level rather than knowing who someone was. And I think it was a really interesting way to share and begin a movement here of trying to fix our food system. So I think that's about all I wanted to share, but I'm sure if there are any questions.
Delia, would you like to just, that's fabulous. I have a question for you actually, but would you like to share your video of your Beyond the Plate event that you held? And you also got one little group that are quite important that you invited, and those were the chefs, the people who handle the food in these things. They were there as well. It was a very, very good event, a great event.
Right, let me share the video.
And then once that's done, Dan, we'll come back into have a chat and bring our questions together. Will be you, Delia, and I spotlit after that video. Meanwhile, everyone in the chat there is the link to the Beyond the Plate movement. You can click on that and fill it in your own time or share it. It will also be, or is already on the video, the YouTube video, this event.
Try again.
There you go.
Can you see it?
Yeah, do you want to start from the beginning?
Yeah.
The volume is not playing. The audio isn't playing.
Not sure why, Sue.
No worries. Play it again. It's gone off screen. It's gone off sharing. Just play it again from the beginning.
But was there sound? Was there sound or no sound?
There's no sound. No, there was no sound. But it's really beautiful to watch anyway without the sound. We'll all get the gist of it. And maybe you can explain, voice over it as it plays then. You're not sharing yet. Delia, is it sharing on your side? It's not sharing.
Okay, I don't know why. We tested it and it worked. Sorry, I'll just share it after, I suppose, on the YouTube.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, let's bring Dan, let's spotlight Dan then, and let's have a conversation. I have a question for you. When you said that you have did you say a biodiversity index? Is that something that you've come up with as a company, or is that something that's out there? I think it's such an incredible idea. Biodiversity index on your products.
Yeah, I haven't seen it on products like that so directly. I think there's people playing around with that sort of biodiversity score, but it's quite fun when you're formulating it, because you're like, oh, well, how can we go from 15 to 16, and what would the impact be nutritionally of us doing that? But it's a little bit different because we're focusing on just not macronutrients. So there's such complexity in like how we digest food as well, and the microbes in our gut of how do we make those foods bioavailable, so
100%.
and prebiotic. So I'm really working on trying to look at more of the micronutrients, because that's what's so missing in our diets because of soil. So it's just a different way to look at how do you put together a food. And so it's fun, and a lot of how we process the food as well. So some of the flowers will sprout. What's the impact on sprouting? What's the impact on fermentation? So sometimes you can actually create B vitamins by fermentation. So you can actually add
amazing
to it.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. So, and then other grains, like some of the grains, when you sprout them, improve in nutrition and some decrease in nutrition. So the effect of sprouting and then using those on the availability of digestion for humans is, it's a whole fun world of creating products. But those are the kind of decisions and things we play around with all the time, rather than saying, how do we make the cheapest muesli, get it on the market as fast as possible? And it's just a different way of looking at creating food with intention, which I think, how food should be thought of. And I'm just a bit stubborn. Like right now, my nutrition failed the Kenya standard because it's too high in protein. So now I'm, and they only look at protein, but they look at the macronutrients. But now I have to go to Ministry of Health, and I have to change the whole KEBS cereal standards. So instead of saying to us, congratulations, you've created a breakfast cereal that's higher in protein than our standard, it's you get a letter saying that you failed because it's out of the standard.
Gosh.
So
it's so ridiculous. You should be, you broke the scale. You've like, it's the exact opposite of what they should be saying.
But what's fun is the goal of creating these products is also, so through the milk we see a cash business. So farmers rely on those cash crops, smallhold farmers, and they understand that sort of how cash crops work. And so one of the challenges in Kenya is a lot of the NGOs will say to farmers, okay, could you grow millet and sorghum? Because in the region where you are in Kenya, maize will fail. Maize failed there with the rain. But millet and sorghum, which are some of our older ancient grains, can survive. But yet the demand and uptake is for maize. So how do we create demand to get those farms starting to get biodiversity back onto the farm? And the way we can do that is create demand for products for those grains, biodiverse grains, so that when the farmer turns around, suddenly the maize fails and the millet and sorghum are there and doing well. So it's a way for us to get our farms back to being biodiverse through being an evil processor as we are. But there's ways you can do things where you can make a difference. And we see that with our dairy farmers. And so we're just applying that across now to the grain farmers, where their maize will fail in a drought. They'll have the sorghum because we've asked them to grow the sorghum, because we will uptake it, and then they'll have food for their families and their farms will become healthier. It just doesn't work. We've had, a long a lot of money coming into Kenya with NGOs telling our farmers what to grow, and yet we're still in a bad place. I mean, our maize yields are no better than the 1960s here.
Yeah,
So we have so much money and so many inputs going into maize, yet we're failing to feed Kenya because we're trying to grow maize where it shouldn't grow, and it's as a monocrop.
Yeah, and what you're doing is, it's more of a holistic 360 back to the farmer. You're caring about the farmer. You're caring that he has money in his pocket, even if climate is non-forgiving, and even if other things fail. And I think that and that also, again, building relationships, and it's relationships all the way up, isn't it, from the microbes right through to the end to the consumer, which is brings in the bigger discussion about your beyond the plate movement. Dan, do you have similar movements in the US that we can learn from, or have you seen them in other parts of the world? This is the beginning of a really lovely idea and a great movement. Potential, has great potential.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything Delia is talking about is critically important. And, there's one thing, which is, how do you manage the environment to optimize the quality of the crop you harvest? And then you were halfway there. The second half is, how do you take the thing that you harvested and turn it into the optimal food? And so what she's talking about with the lactic fermentation and everything else is it's extraordinarily valuable and important. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to start. It's just indigenous cultures globally, for millennia, sprouted, fermented, all their meats and their grains and their dairy, and it's the microbes again. It's back to the microbes and having them pre-digest. And it's entirely true that you get higher levels of nutrients and nutrient availability after fermentation and after sprouting. And I mean, I'm just focusing on the up to harvest piece, but she's got it's just as important what you do after harvest. And you can take a high quality food and totally destroy it post harvest. You take a good grain and you take the bran off of it and you turn it into a white flour, or you can sprout it and turn it into an amazing sourdough. So certainly,
but why I like it as well is it's like what you said with the raw cash and salt water. That's why we have our classroom now, is everybody thinks that processing has to be complicated and you need fancy equipment, and you can't do it in a rural, a smaller rural setting. But the goal is, as well, with our farmers, is to say, right, well, we're processing sorghum, come and learn how you can process sorghum too, and keep that nutrition in your village as well. So it's that empowerment to say, you can do it too. And it's not complicated because humans have been doing it for so long, and
humans have been
some
doing
of
this
it's so
forever.
simple that some of it's so simple that you just need the knowledge and you need to get on and do it.
It's our heritage. These traditional practices have been developed and carried on for millennia because they worked better than anything else. And it's only in the past couple decades that industry has come in and sort of denatured us, right? I mean, but I mean, it is our heritage. And if our forebears were able to do that with much less technology than we have, this concept that we can't do it is completely ridiculous. And, value add, if you can not only grow the crop, but then turn it into the final product, you remove all the middle people, which is where all the profit is in the industrial system. So, if you want to be solving
and it's it's this insecurity and fear around, oh, food has to come from a supermarket, or it's just such in the whole sphere of humans, it's such a tiny little blip where we've lost we're so insecure about, I don't know how to make a yogurt, or I don't know how to make cheese, or I don't, whereas our ancestors have done it for so long. And it's for us, it's like, how do we encourage people to trust themselves again, to be connected back to food? And that doesn't mean you have to make yogurt every day, because I know we're all busy, but at least know how yogurt's made, so that you're connected back to and have that choice, and have that conversation with whatever yogurt you're buying, the company, so that you know what they're doing to it.
Yeah.
You know, the other, you know, as you're both talking about this, and I'm looking at the analogy back to the microbes that have been that did all those things that they did for billions of years before they gave rise to plants. And then plants evolved because of that. They were part of that evolution because of that. And the plants do their thing with their microbes because those symbiotics. And then we evolved to consume those, and because take away all the stupid technology. My brother actually says the worst thing in the world that was ever invented was the fridge, because that then made us dumb down our ability to save our foods. And in the saving that we were doing, we're doing it, like you're saying, with the microbes and re-ingesting those. And as we know, we are more microbe than we are human. So we were all keeping that cycle going. Now, when you look at that analogy with plants and the agro dealers and the seeds we've talked about coming out as dumb seed or seed that are not bio-attuned, and plants that are flailing, we're exactly the same. We are like those conventional plants. We're conventional humans. We've lost all of, you know, we're losing, and many of us have lost our ability to even communicate properly with the microbiomes in our guts because of the way we were reared and the food that we ate from the time we were reared, and the bottle feeding, and the, you know, all of those things that we thought were good for us. Yeah, we're just like, we're conventional humans in that sense.
We're being denatured, and the trajectory, if you continue being denatured, is to die, right? We're in this completely historically anomalous dynamic, and if we continue in this trajectory, it's, you know, those who do should expect not to survive, and those who remember to return to the, you know, that symbiosis can expect to thrive. But it's really an opportunity for choice, and unfortunately, if we're just passive and relax into the flow of the dominant, you know, industrial, whatever you want to call it, you know, capitalist system, the trajectory does not look good.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, the work that you're doing, Dan, the work that I'm doing, Delia, you're doing the same thing. It's educating and educating and educating. And part of me just feels like, and Delia, actually what you're also going to be doing is changing policy, because when your products require statutory government documents to be changed, it is something. It is a great pin in the ground to say, hey, let's have a discussion about this. Why is this happening? And if this is possible, they're like the green dots, right? On Dan's graph. So the green dots up there were like, that's the potential. So if that's the potential, how do we all get there? So bringing that back to policy, wouldn't it be fabulous? I mean, when I spoke yesterday about our you know, the fertilizer subsidy that went so wrong, yet actually went so biologically right in my mind, because they gave farmers what the soils actually need. When we think, if, you know, best case scenario, just imagine if government policy said, we're no longer going to use synthetics. We're going to actually drive agriculture from a microbiome, a soil microbiome perspective. Wouldn't that just be fantastic? That's where we need to get the big, somehow collectively get that on the agenda of our governments, right? But I know, starting with the people, because a lot of people say our government's going to do their own thing, but there'll come a point where they can't ignore it.
Here's hoping. That would be what governments should do, right? Is to actually be there to support people's well-being. That would be the principle of the government, the theory.
I think I'll move to that country wherever it exists.
I'm here in Sweden. I was just meeting with these people, and they were like, yeah, this is the way the government works. If there's good science, that's what happens. That's how we do things in Scandinavia. I'm like, I've heard about that. I've heard about that concept. It's amazing. And I'm like, maybe I'm not sure. It's pretty cold here, though. I'm not sure everybody wants to live in Scandinavia, but it they were genuinely like, if it's real science, that's what the government does. There's no corruption. We follow the data. I was like, I can't believe it. That's not what it's like where I come from.
Well, hopefully, Delia, that then the link will come back with all the donor money that's coming in, but coming in the wrong way. Hopefully Dan's making those connections on that side, and they're, you know, adopting things there, so that the Swedish funds that come into places say, no, we're only going in if we're going to do regen.
Yeah.
So go for it, Dan, go. And get the Swedes.
It's a symbiotic dynamic. We're a polyculture of microbes, all you know, sharing through our mycelial network. That's the way I see it. Yeah, takes everyone.
Great. Well, we've got one question for you in the chat there, Delia. Siabu Fadane. Siabu, I think, is in South Africa. It says, can Delia kindly share what has contributed to milk quality and quantity improvements besides increasing farmer numbers?
Yeah, so it's quite intensive on the ground. So we have agronomists and vets on the ground. So we had partnered with someone who was working on the feeds, because one of the problems in Kenya is the quality of what our cows are eating is terrible. And so not only from aflatoxin as well, residues in them, but also, yeah, just the quality of nutrients. And so we needed to then take over those inputs. So I'm just working now on our fermented, so being able to do fermented feeds also for our dairy farmers. We're just doing the trials now on 2 of our own farms, and it's looking pretty good, as well as our own pigs. And so not only do we benefit from fermented foods, but we're seeing it's working pretty well on some of the cows. And because a lot of if you're not in Kenya, then a lot of our farmers are zero grazing, or they have a little bit of grass, but most of those cows are on smallhold farms where the cows are, they'll be tied to a string with some grass, but they're not roaming large pastures. So the feed is quite important. So we work on that, lots of education. So that works. And then yeah, paying on quality milk. So we bonus on the quality of the milk. So the farmers are incentivized to work with us on getting better milk, because they get paid more for better milk. And that's something they understand. If, as Dan said, if the economics work, then everybody works. But the education side, and so if you bring your milk to us and then your milk failed the collection, then our vet, that's what triggers the vet to go. So the vet's job every day is basically whose milk failed, and then we go and do the farm audit and then help the farmer to say, hey, this cow's got mastitis, or what the conditions are. So we also work on something called cow signals, which is animal welfare, so cow welfare as well, because a lot of the challenges there, if the cows are in muddy conditions, or the housing is not, the structure's not right. So our vets are out there helping them on improvements as well, and on education. So we work through a whole system of monthly trainings on animal welfare as well, because that's a little bit of a challenge here. And I love the cow signals, because it's basically, if you won't lie down where the cow's lying down, then it's not up to standard. And so it's a really simple, I think it's Danish, started in Denmark. It's a really simple way to train farmers on keeping the cows happy, and they see huge benefit to that, because of lack of the mastitis levels go down because the cows are in clean conditions. So it's a sort of full cycle of animal welfare and feed, and that vet support is what's key. I hope that answered your question.
Wonderful. I'm sure that it did. So I think we're running out of time now. We've come to the end of this presentation. And what next for the students who are here? This was your last class. So now you've just got to get your homework in, and then we will inform you on your WhatsApp group what the next steps are going to be about your graduation, etc. But I know that a lot of you, and I've heard it, and I've got some people who are writing into me saying, can we continue? Can we do this? Can we do whatever? So if you go back to this video, you'll see that there are a lot of links to go to. There's Dan's classes you can go to. There is join the Beyond the Plate with Delia. If you've got friends and family who want to join our next iCow Soil Advocacy class, it's going to be starting in January 12th, 2025. There are some of the things you can do. And one of the things that I will do for you, I've had a lot of people say, can we do microbial safaris from different classes as well? So we may do maybe a monthly microbial safari where I'll take you back under the microscope across different microbes, maybe even back to Manchester. And that would be one way. And we'll also put together, and I think I'll ask Dan and Delia to actually help me do this, to put a playlist of information that we can then share back to the students, that the information that has helped you a lot, that you think is vital information for people in your sphere. I have a lot of videos and things that we watch, a lot of podcasts and things, but if we put a playlist together that we can then share back with the students so they can then go in and find the right people who are out there and the right information. There's a lot of stuff on the internet, but it's really hard to find it if you without the kind of support, as some of the students from the M-Pesa Foundation said yesterday. So maybe we'll work on that and then put something together. I've also seen that somebody has said in the group, there's a Chef Kibui, his name keeps coming up. Please get him to join the Beyond the Plate, share the link with him. Let's get him into the conversations.
Yeah, he already follows us, I can see, but I've not spoken to him. I could see he was following us. So I'll reach out to him.
Super, super. And on that note, let's do parting shots from our fantastic speakers. Dan and Delia, I'm honestly so honored to have had you in our conversation. It's extremely valuable. Nutrient density is that end that, you know, it makes us. So thank you all. Parting shots from you both.
I think I saw, if I may interrupt, a comment saying somehow to affirm you, Sue, for all that you're doing, because as I understand it, without you, this would not happen at all. Have you, is that something parting shots can happen for you as well? Just saying. I seems to me from where I sit that you're doing amazing, brilliant, wonderful work, and that needs to be named and acknowledged. And I'll just gonna step out on a limb and say that. So
thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for what you do. And thank you, Delia.
Takes one to know one. Takes one to know one. Yeah. Great.
Delia, any parting shot from you?
Yeah, I just think it's tying the soil to humans, and it's just all connected. So I think this was a great end to the session on soil, because it ends in human health. And if the microbes are functioning well, the plants are functioning well, and you're functioning well. So I think that's my parting shot.
Thank you for that. So we're all going to leave here functioning well. Okay, we know how to now. We know what to do. Thank you to everyone for being here. And thank you, Team iCow, for diligently being there, making sure that the tech, all the behind the scenes stuff is working. It was pretty smooth today. Well done. And until next time, and Dan, enjoy the rest of your education journey, advocacy.
I look forward to coming down and meeting you all in person. Yeah.
Super.
Great. Okay.
All right.
See you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.